It's top hour.
Top of the hour, and this week we are not waiting for Dan. He's coming back from some time off, so we given him a little extra time to get back to reality today instead of hitting him hard with Tech Talk first thing.
That's right.
So welcome everybody to what we think is, without Dan, we think this is episode 28 of Baseline Tech Talk Tuesday. And for anyone who's new joining us for the first time, you can see all the previous episodes on the YouTube channel, which is Baseline Web Training, all one word, on YouTube. And you just see Chris and I today. Again, for intros, I'm Andy Humphrey, and Regional Sales Manager for the Northeast. And Chris is our VP of Sales. And again, if you're just joining us, Dan is out today. And so Chris and I will be going back and forth a little bit, but we would like to have some participation from all of you. If you would be interested, we'd like to do this, do today, let's say, two different ways. First, kind of an ask us anything. Let's preface that, Chris. Ask us almost anything.
Almost anything, as long as it's not, derogatory, passive aggressive, rhetorical.
Yeah.
It's a family show. But
absolutely.
Yeah. If there's something that we haven't talked about on Tech Talk Tuesday that you're just burning to ask or want some input on, by all means, throw it in the chat.
Yeah, or something that's on your mind. Recently you've been challenged with a site or with a fresh site that's got something going on that you want to hit us with. Feel free to put something in the chat or ask us a question. And then, since we know we don't always get amazing participation, we are going to go through what Chris and I feel becomes almost one of our most frequently asked questions, which is wrapped around AppManager and Base Manager and adding controllers into Base Manager. That's where sort of us as RSM team and inside sales and support get a lot of questions, and we hold a lot of hands. Yep. And what's really pretty awesome about Baseline technology is that it's really simple to add a controller into the AppManager system and into Base Manager.
Yep. So let's talk about a couple of things there that come off immediately for me. Number one, talking about AppManager and Base Manager, and working with engineering as frequently as I do, and talking about product development and all of those things. I think we need to discern and clearly identify what the difference is between AppManager and Base Manager. And when you're signing into your baseline controllers, you really should be signing into baselineapps.net rather than basemanager.net, because that is what will get you into the AppManager framework, gives you access to Base Manager, but it can enhance the user-face experience, because from an engineering perspective, they're developing for AppManager. And if you sign in to AppManager, then you're going to have potentially a bit more fluid experience than if you're just going into Base Manager directly.
Yeah, good point. And sometimes if you have logged into Base Manager in the past, we know how browsers work. You start typing something in and you immediately go back to Base Manager instead of baselineapps.net. And I've experienced this with individuals on the phone, really routing them to the mobile version. They sort of say, I can't find the mobile version. And that's because they're not in Baseline apps where you have the option to choose mobile access and then see it in the mobile version. They're sort of stuck in the Base Manager viewpoint.
Yep. And from an interweb scenario, oftentimes if you're signing into the same page over and over again, it's just going to cache what you were signed into last. And so you may see something that isn't real because of that cache scenario, and just logging back into a previous instance without only going out and coming back in. So just a little point to make that could be helpful.
Yep. So think of the Base Manager as an app inside of Baseline apps, right? So that's kind of the best way to think about it, is it's an app. So Chris, why don't we, I'll kind of go through our rough outline of how easy it is and to demonstrate adding a controller to Base Manager. Maybe you can look at the Q&A, because sometimes it's hard to look at both,
right?
With
I got
two eyes. So
I've got one question that came in. Since we opened it up, we got to address what comes in, right? So Josh Wooten, I forgot to take a soil sensor out of the program before I started to search. Now I have a revolving communication error with the old one and can't get it off. How can I address this issue?
Okay, so what it sounds like, just to restate his question, is that he added a sensor to a program. And then you might have to keep going here, Josh, but then if the sensor is no longer there, has been removed from the system, you need to unhook it from the program. Right, Chris? And then you can run a search and it'll be gone. You got to unassign it. And that same procedure also works for other devices like flow sensors. Sometimes we've seen flow sensor fail and or be replaced, but it's still sort of configured. And when you run that search, it's still there because it's set in the programming.
Yep. So you got to first unconfigure it, disassociate it with anything, a program, a zone, whatever that is, and then do the search again, and it should disappear as an option to select and assign. Yep. All right. Okay.
Good. So, great question, Josh. Appreciate you, man.
Yep.
Okay. So when I think of adding a controller to Base Manager, I think of it as really a 3 or 4 step process. And the first part of that happens before you visit the site. So a couple things to think about. Number one is you need to have a AppManager account someplace established with Baseline, so that when you're ready to add that controller, you can attach it to your account. And so many times, we're working with individuals that call us, they're on site and they go, I'm ready to add this controller. They're really excited. They can't wait to get it added. And then we say, do you have an account? And they say, no. What do you mean, an account? Yeah. So you need to create an AppManager account, and you can do that on the Baseline website. I believe it's under support, AppManager account setup. Create your account. They're free to set up, and that will be the place that you will attach the controller to.
Yep. Okay. And Dan just recently did a tutorial video on creating an AppManager account, right?
Yep.
So that can be referenced on the YouTube channel.
Yep. And then, so there's planning for that at home or at the office. The second thing would be planning for cell modem activation. So if you plan to use a Baseline cell modem, that also needs to be activated in advance. And although there are times when we can work with you to activate it quickly, the preferred method is to fill out the online form, which requires both the SIM ID and the serial number of the device. Those need to be filled out on the cell modem activation form. And keep in mind that information is written or typed onto the cell modem. So if you are registering the device, but the device is on site and you're not on site, you'll need to get that piece of information. So sometimes that's a little bit of a holdup. And again, it's just a simple form. You fill it out. Typically, those are activated same day, although we like to reserve 24 hours in case it's busy at the office during peak times. So when you have your AppManager account set up and you have your cell modem activated, you're now ready to connect the controller. So at that point, I would say it's time to go to the site, right? Do a little bit of planning in advance. Don't roll up to the site and hope to connect it unless you're an experienced user, you have a Base Manager account, and you kind of know what you're doing at that point. Sound good so far, Chris?
Yes, sir. Yep.
Okay.
Perfect. I think the thing to emphasize is that, it's a process. So you got to follow the process. And if you follow the process that Andy's outlining, then it's much easier to add a controller to your account. So it's like baking a cake. You got to follow the process in order to get a good result. So,
yeah. In cell modems, it's easy to say we have to activate them. If that makes some sense. The other thing to keep in mind would be any other method that you plan to use to communicate, right? So just because there's an Ethernet cable run to the controller doesn't mean that Ethernet cable or the internet connection is provisioned and ready for you to connect. So it's always a good idea to just double check with your client, your IT manager, whoever is in charge of that communication. If you're not using a cell modem, to just, before you go to the site, just reach out and say, hey, are we ready to connect? Is there internet? Are we good to go? That'll save you time when you get to the site. All right. So I think at this point, you get to the site, and if it's a cell modem, you'll want to power cycle the device. So just like your phones, if anybody's replaced a SIM card in your cell phone and you're at AT&T or Verizon, what's the first thing they do? They power cycle.
Reset your network.
Phone.
Yep.
Exactly. And that wakes it up and lets the modem go talk to a tower and establish a connection. So that's generally...
that brings up an excellent time to bring up this question regarding antennas, 3G versus 4G. Are they identified, and what happens if you use the wrong antenna?
You going to take that one?
I don't know. So identified. So the antennas that come with the cell modems, they're both what we call the salt shaker antenna. So it looks like a little shaker of salt, little white dome or pyramid. The 4Gs are going to be taller than the previous 3Gs. I'm not sure if there is an identifier on the outside, on the specs of it, on the label. Haven't ever looked at it that closely. But if you're using the wrong antenna with the wrong modem, you may have connectivity issues. So you want to make sure that they pair up. We always will ship the appropriate antenna with the modem when it's ordered or installed on a controller. But that can create some communication conflicts.
Yep.
So let's assume that we do have a good modem and antenna combination. We're going to connect it. Then what?
Yep. And keep in mind too, if you are, let's say you're upgrading from 3G to 4G and you purchase the 4G modem, we ship with it the correct antenna as part of the package. So they're really less likely would there be a time when you'd be mismatching those, I guess, because we do ship the antenna with that.
Yeah.
So you're on site, and I think at this point, Chris, I'm going to log in to a controller here. I'll do that while we're talking. So if you're not using a cell modem and you're using Ethernet, you want to make sure that the cable is connected to the controller, and a good sort of check is to see if there's any lights coming on the back of the Ethernet port, because that oftentimes tells us that there's power on that cable. And believe it or not, sometimes you plug in an Ethernet cable and it's coming out of the wall, but it's not actually plugged into anything on the other side of the wall.
That's right.
So that's something to keep in mind.
Getting to the internet.
Correct. And if you're using Wi-Fi, this would be a time where you're going to go through the settings on the controller and you're going to connect to the Wi-Fi network. And again, if you've called in advance and you've talked to your client or the network administrator, they should let you know what is the name of the network and then what is the password. Very similar to how you would connect to Wi-Fi on your computer, tablet, or phone. And you want to get enter that into the Wi-Fi information. All right. How are we looking?
I see it.
Okay, perfect. Let me move this bar out of the way.
Wow, that neighborhood looks familiar.
Yeah. Right. Let's zoom out and give everyone a perspective on where we're at here. Salt Lake City, Utah. Right on.
Hey, look at that.
So let's jump over to live view. This will be our best way to kind of go through some of the menu options. And let's assume you've got your cable plugged in or your Wi-Fi connected. You're going to turn the dial to the network settings. And then typically we'll have you go right through the menus from top to bottom. If you're using an Ethernet connection, you really only need these first two menus. The Ethernet setup will be menu number 1. Now, again, we have here Chris's controller.
So we should verify what code is that controller's running, because that's not my controller.
Oh, this one's not? That's why. Oh. Okay.
Yeah. That's why it looked different. I could
that's
tell
why it looked different.
Reaction. You're like, this doesn't look familiar.
Chris would typically not have a static IP address. That's what we were talking about earlier. So
yeah, you gotta go to Yellcrest.
Okay.
No.
Oh, it's inside your.
The site is Yellcrest. You gotta get to the right controller, brother.
There we go.
All right. Now we're talking.
Again, back to the network menu. All right. Yeah, let's see, what version of code are you running? 17.13. Okay, great.
That's most current.
Yep.
So while we're going through this process, if a cell modem goes in on an RMA and it was previously installed, can it be reused and reassigned to another customer?
Let's see. So this is a good topic, because cell modems are fairly universal. Yep. So there is really no correlation between which controller and which cell modem. They're not actually tied to each other.
Matter. It's the SIM card that's the critical aspect of it. Mm-hmm. So yes, if you get a cell modem back on an RMA that was previously installed, it can be reassigned to another customer as long as the SIM card is not associated with the previous customer in the previous account.
Yep. And we have some users that keep a cellular modem that they own, let's say a contractor, and they own it, and then they put it in controllers during the installation time or for the first couple of weeks after to give them communication. And then you can remove it and you can put it in another controller. So they are universal between controllers. So here Chris is using Wi-Fi for his setup. I'm going to jump back now. And then we're going to go into the Base Manager server setup. Now, this is kind of where the magic happens. So every baseline controller comes from the factory pre-programmed with the baseline server address. And the baseline server address is either a website URL, which is a DNS name that would be overriding an IP address, but the server also has a specific server address. And what's cool about this is it comes pre-programmed from the factory. So if you have your Ethernet cable plugged into your controller, or you have your Wi-Fi set up, or you have your cell modem configured, all you have to do is come to this menu and you highlight the box, which is currently blue. I'm not going to change it or we'll lose Chris's controller. But when you're starting fresh, this box will display the word connect.
Yep.
And then you can see we have the words press enter to connect. So it's really as simple as highlighting this box and pressing enter to connect. And again, it's pre-programmed from the factory to call baseline and say, hi, here I am. I'm controller XYZ. Here's my MAC address. And then in return, the baseline server will send back to the controller an authorization PIN. And that'll be a big yellow box that displays right on the screen of the controller. And you'll want to either take a picture of that PIN code or write it down. And that PIN code is what you will use inside your Base Manager account to link this controller to your account.
Yep. So go show them where that's done, because that's the secret sauce.
Yep. And I'm in what we call a super user account. So I'm going to sign out of the super user account really quick. and sign into a different demo so you can actually see what it really looks like. We'll come back to Base Manager. You're going to come up to what we call, it's kind of cheesy, we call it the hamburger menu. You're going to go down to Administration, and then again to Administration. This is going to open up a secondary browser, and these are all the backend admin configuration settings of your AppManager account. So one step I didn't mention at the beginning is if this is a brand new site, you'll want to come into your admin settings and create a new site. A new site is like a folder or a bucket that is going to contain the controller. Okay, then you can go here to My Controllers and you can select Add a New Controller. When you're in the Add a Controller screen, you'll select your site name. And again, this is why I mentioned add a site. If it's brand new, you want to do that in advance. And then you'll take the PIN code that we just mentioned, and you'll enter the PIN code right here into this box. And then you'll click Authorize a Controller. Now, keep in mind, if you see this list of users, these are currently all of the users that are in my personal demo account. So if I authorize the controller right off the bat, all of these users will get access to the controller. So if you're adding a controller to an existing Base Manager account, you'll want to give some thought to who you would like to have access to the controller. Otherwise, by default, everyone will have access, which may or may not be your intent. So then you click Authorize a Controller, and I'm going to click back. The controller will then be on your in your account on your list of controllers. And if you've clicked to a different screen, you can get back to those by hovering over My Controllers and then Edit My Controller. We kind of have two remaining steps that are important in order to get this fully configured. So we just added the controller. The second step is going to be to set the time zone. So this becomes one of our frequently asked questions is my controller is displaying the wrong time, and by default it's going to display Mountain Standard Time because that's where baseline's located. So by default, every time a controller connects, it is given Mountain Standard Time because it doesn't know where the controller is located. So the second to last step is to pick a time zone that you'd like your controller to be on, and then you'll save, or in this case, the button says edit, but we really mean save.
Yes. That was worth the whole Tech Talk Tuesday right there. Yeah. So, engineers speak is different from user speak oftentimes.
Yeah, it's like confirming the edit, I guess.
Yes, exactly.
So now you've changed the time zone, and you would be surprised. I mean, gosh, we get a lot of calls because the time zone's incorrect. So keep in mind you have full access to modify the time zone. And then the last step, which I'm not going to display on the screen here, the last step is to power cycle the controller. Okay, and this remains the same regardless if you're using a cell modem, Wi-Fi, Ethernet, the connection type doesn't matter. As soon as you connect your controller to Base Manager for the first time and you've set the time zone and you have communication to it, the very last step is to do a final power cycle. And what that means is when the controller first connects, live view is all you see. Okay, these different menu options are not available to the user when it first connects. And live view is what we call sort of the freemium version of Base Manager. Everyone can have access to live view at no charge all the time. And so it connects that way right off the bat as default. When you power cycle the controller, and again, it'll automatically connect to the server after you power cycle it, then you'll have the full Base Manager. And so we get a lot of calls for that, where that final power cycle step was not finished and or the subscription has expired. Okay, so that's another thing to keep in mind. If you're seeing live view only, it's because a subscription may have expired. And if you click this little information bubble at the bottom, you can see the subscription date. So if you have live view only, you can see when it would have expired and just needs to be paid and renewed.
Yep. Brilliant. Very good. All right.
Again,
So we've got another question that's come in, not really related to what you just described, but I think it's a good question. What's the most cost-effective means of converting an existing two-wire system of another brand to a baseline system, where they'd have to change out the decoders? Mm-hmm. So that's the critical aspect of it, is that the decoders are proprietary to each manufacturer, and so if you are switching from one brand to another, you will need to replace the decoders.
Yep. And that would be up to how the system was installed. So keep in mind that if we're looking at the cost of a system on a per zone basis, a baseline bicoder, if you were to use a quad bicoder versus a single bicoder, the cost per zone is half if you use a quad. So if there's times when you can put in a 4-station decoder in a manifold, definitely take advantage of that. It's not always possible, but I would look for little things like that to try to lower the conversion cost.
Yeah. Or if another valve box is within like 100 feet or so of the decoder location itself, you can use a multi-station decoder to help streamline some of the costs associated with that too. Mm-hmm.
And sometimes boxes are single, but they might be next to each other, things like that. And, just as it relates to retrofitting two-wire, take a look at the wire, the condition of it, or what you can see anyway. Maybe find out who put in the first system so you can get an idea for the type of quality that other contractor may use in their installations. I would say definitely make sure that the wire is double jacketed and not just 2-conductor single wire. For sure, I wouldn't look at it if it's not double jacketed 2-wire.
Right. Yep. And there's several other manufacturers that have decoder cable that's double jacketed that will meet baseline specification, but just make sure it's double jacketed, double insulated decoder cable for sure. Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. All right. Anything you need to finish on with adding a controller?
Yeah, that's the final step, is that the power cycle. I think after that, the types of calls that we get have to do with users, adding additional users to the system. And so keep in mind that admin panel that I just displayed. If you are the company admin, you have full access to add additional users to the account, and you can decide which controllers that they have. So I would recommend taking a look in the back side of the system. Take a look at all the menu settings. Don't be afraid to search around and see what you can discover. And we try to give you all the power, so you have full access to set the system up the way that works best for you.
That's right. Yeah, and we are looking to help flatten the support curve, like we've said before. Trying to give you access to information that will help you to self-support where you can. Obviously, we're always available for tech support by calling in, but we know there are a lot of things that can be handled insight by the user, and we're just trying to provide information to help you better facilitate that so that it values your time and our time as well. So very cool.
Yeah.
All right. One last quick question. Is there a print function for schedules and programs in Base Manager?
Kind of.
Kind of. Yes.
Yeah, we have, I'm sure that there'll be some more advanced and, let's say pretty looking prints and reports coming. You can inside Base Manager, I don't know if I'll have time to go through it, but you can basically export your current configuration into a CSV, and it will have all of the current programming information, all of the decoder information with the corresponding descriptions if you've entered any. So it's basically a way to have a printout of the entire configuration of the system, all the programs, all the devices, and their settings.
Yep. Excellent. Yeah, that may be a good topic for Tech Talk Tuesday, is just, report analyzation and where to find them and how to.
Yeah, Dan may be covering some of that next week. Chris and I haven't had a chance to really connect up and go into what's coming up next week, but I think Dan had mentioned talking about maybe some messages or alarms or reports and things like that. So great question and good way to wrap it up too. Just looking towards next week.
We have taken up our half hour. 30 minutes goes quick. So we appreciate your participation. Thanks for joining us once again. We will be here same place, same time next week. So please join us and go out and have a good week. Work hard, be safe, and if you have additional questions, be sure to let us know or reach out. We'll be happy to help you. So
appreciate your time, guys. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next week.